Hello and good evening. I am Cody Moon. This is June 30th, 2022. Today I am going to discuss the regulation of the gastric phase of digestion. This is for medical physiology, PHSL 1010. And like I said, I am Cody Moon. So, what is the gastric phase of digestion? Well, the gastric phase of digestion begins as the chewed up food, or the bolus, is swallowed. The gastric phase then activates distension of the stomach. This allows for the stomach to expand and accept that bolus into the stomach. Presence of peptides or amino acids in the lumen activate endocrine cells and enteric neurons. Hormones, neurotransmitters, and paracrine molecules then influence motility and secretion. Motility is the movement of the substance, and then the secretion obviously is the acid secretion into the gastric area, into the stomach, which we will discuss further into this presentation. So, what is the stomach? The stomach is the main part of the gastric phase of digestion. The stomach has three main functions. The first is obvious, the storage. The stomach stores food and regulates its passage into the small intestine. The small intestine is actually where most of the digestion and absorption takes place. Secondly, its second main function is digestion. Chemically and mechanically digest food into chyme. Chyme is a soupy mixture of small particles, which is the bolus when it is broken down into that soupy mixture. The third is defense. The body or the stomach actually protects the body in many different ways from unwanted bacteria and pathogens. It can be something as in the food that there's some sort of bacteria that causes harm to the body, or even a viral incident that gets into the stomach will try to protect the body from the harm that the virus could cause. At the same time, the stomach also protects itself from the harm of its own secretions. So obviously, with the acids in the stomach, it can cause harm to areas that aren't well protected from that acid, and the stomach pretty much just protects itself from those acids. So, gastric secretions. The lumen of the stomach is lined with mucus producing epithelium, which has openings of gastric pits. The gastric glands are engulfed with multiple cell types, producing gastric acid, enzymes, hormones, and paracrine molecules. We will discuss the rest of those in the next few slides. So, gastrin secretion. G cells secrete gastrin into the blood. Gastrin release is stimulated by the presence of amino acids and peptides in the stomach by that distension or the expansion of the stomach. The gastrin's primary function is to promote acid release. So, acid secretion, the parietal cells deep in the gastric glands secrete gastric acid, or HCl. Gastric acid actually has multiple functions. One of those is the acid in the stomach lumen causes release and activation of pepsin, which is an enzyme that is used to digest proteins. It also triggers somatostatin release from D cells. HCl denatures proteins, unfolding protein chains, making the peptide bonds between amino acids more accessible to digestion. So without the HCl denaturing that protein, our body wouldn't have the capability of breaking those peptide bonds down to make those amino acids more accessible for digestion. So those would just pass through our body without getting that key nutrients from those amino acids. Fourthly, it kills bacteria and other microorganisms. And then fifthly, activates salivary amylase, stopping carbohydrate digestion that begins in the mouth. Paracrine secretion is from the gastric mucosa, including histamine, somatostatin, and intrinsic factor. Histamine, which we have all heard of, is secreted by ECL cells in response to gastrin or acetylcholine stimulation. Histamine diffuses to its target, the parietal cells, and stimulates acid secretion by combining with H2 receptors on parietal cells. The intrinsic factor is a protein secreted by the same gastric parietal cells that secrete acid. Somatostatin is also known as hypothalamic growth hormone inhibiting hormone, which is secreted by the D cells. Somatostatin primary function is negative feedback signal for the gastric secretion. It shuts down acid secretion directly and indirectly by decreasing gastrin and histamine secretion. So, as we go back through these, the gastric secretion is the first and foremost thing to happen once the bolus passes into the stomach, because this promotes this acid release. And then with the acid, we have multiple different factors that or functions that come with the acid. And then the paracrine secretion can control that acid secretion, obviously directly or indirectly, which controls the digestion of the bolus. So then when we look into histamine in the H2 receptors, the H2 receptors are what we think of when we have like acid reflux or a medical situation like that. So acid reflux medications such as Tums or prescription medication, those focus on the H2 receptors and controlling that so we don't have that hyperactive acid secretion causing the heartburn or the acid reflux. So that is a rundown of the regulation of the gastric phase of digestion. Like I said, I am Cody Moon, and this is for Medical Physiology 1010. And here are my citations. Thank you, and have a great day.